forward to the campaigns every year, so I'm so happy that it's back, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But first, I mean, we can't ignore, of course, your history. You're at Naughty Dog for a sum total of many years, working on Uncharted games prior to this. So how is a Call of Duty game a design-wise, narrative-wise, different approach to sit down with than an Uncharted game, and maybe even similar in any ways, too?
Sure. Well, the goals are always the same. You know, we're always looking for this emotional parity between our players and the characters that they're playing as.
Yeah.
Both instances. Now, with a third-person game like Uncharted, we have a few more levers we can pull, but on the flip side, in first person, you're not controlling an avatar that you see on screen, you are the character. You're literally walking in their shoes, or in this case, in their boots.
Now, what for you, between those two extremes, what makes a good Call of Duty campaign for you?
To me, you know, we have a saying in Call of Duty land, which is, you know, no one fights alone, right? It's about the brotherhood, it's about the teamwork. Ultimately, these senses of pressure are to push characters together in some cases, and for tension that kind of pulls at those bonds.
Yeah.
You're fighting for yourself, you're fighting for the guy or the gal next to you, you're fighting to succeed in the mission. That these games should feel a sense of hope, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of empowerment for our players, agency. I get to play next to a guy like Captain Price on these nighttime clandestine raids that I don't read about in the newspaper, and I'm making the world a safer place.
Yeah, so I want to, there's several scenes, having finished and reviewed the campaign, that I kind of wanted to dig in with you on. And the first one is one from just a sheer game design perspective. One of my favorite missions was the Embassy Escape, where you put the gun down entirely. In fact, you go effectively out of body, and you're seeing the world through the surveillance cameras and having to guide that civilian character safely through as the Russians have overrun the embassy. So where did that come from?
That falls into that same sort of tenet I was talking about earlier, where you have good variety, where you have exotic gameplay, where you have interesting mechanics. That's been a hallmark of modern warfare, and to me, that's quintessentially that.
Yeah.
It's unexpected, it's novel, it's still emotionally gripping and riveting, and it's a really nice change of pace. And then sort of thematically, what's interesting about that is we've seen players, they bond with Stacy. Stacy is who you're controlling there, and we see all these people. You know, there's a moment later in the game where I'll put it this way without spoilering it.
Well, this is all spoilers now. Everybody
Okay, all right,
watching
cool.
this. Yeah.
I mean, we've seen our players really care about Stacy, and we're really wanting to keep her safe and being attached to her, and we never saw that. We had mentioned, you know, we knew that she was going to be this NPC that you were guiding to safety, and what we saw from our playtesters was if things didn't work out well for Stacy, we saw players pause, restart, checkpoint, because they really were invested in protecting her. But by the same time, by the same token, your mission in the embassy rescue or the embassy escape is not to save Stacy. Your mission is to make sure that the wolf doesn't get broken out by his followers. Right. And so again, it's that burden that these combat operators face, that they aren't firefighters saving a kitty from a tree. They are there to do a job, do it as perfectly as they possibly can, despite imperfect intel and despite an enemy that's doing its best to thwart you at every turn.
So one of the most darkest moments in the game, I think, is also one of its smartest, at least as a player, I thought, from a design perspective, and that is when Farah and Amir, it's the flashback, and they are children, and a Russian insurgent breaks into their home. Tell me about that sequence, about the original idea for it, and I'm very curious because I imagine that probably evolved a lot during the course of design and playtesting.
That entire mission and the other flashback mission where you're playing as Farah is really about, again, this emotional parity between Farah and the player. And our feeling was most of our players, in fact, probably, well, let's say the vast majority of our players don't have a background like Farah's. And so the point of those flashbacks is to bring the player into emotional parity with Farah and to see some of these moments that unfortunately shaped her life, and these moments that really were her sort of a crucible. And in order to really build that empathy with her, when she's a young girl, we had to do a lot of stuff. We had to lower the height of the camera. So much is built around the player view model in the franchise.
Yeah.
That was not an easy task, but we knew that we needed to do that to give you that sense of the asymmetric nature of you and that foe.
From a sheer design perspective, though, what was it always 3 stabs, find a way to injure this guy, and then was it always, is that how it was drawn up?
There are principles that are to be followed that, and that doesn't mean that you're just kind of, painting by numbers, that players have this, sense of rhythm and pacing. It's like music. And so when we played with more or less of those sneak attacks in order to succeed, it just rhythmically didn't feel right. And so we just said, look, that's a convention. People are used to conventions. And so we're going to go with it because it feels right to us and it feels like it's contextually appropriate.
I'm sort of curious if this changed at all over the course of development. You're a, 8-year-old kid holding a gun and aiming it at, again, 2 very big humans.
Capable.
Yeah, who are trained, and it's, you can't just ADS it like you can in the rest of the game when you are an adult trained professional.
And again, when we first blocked that in, we used the normal ADS animations that were already available to us, and it totally fell apart. And we knew that we had to do something unique there. These are grown men, in a sort of sanctioned firing range.
Right.
To be a young child and have to, the only way to get out of this sort of jam is to do this, and never having probably ever seen or maybe you saw one, but you certainly never touched one, or it had to feel, again, overwhelming to her, because I'm sure it would be. And we didn't want it to trivialize it.
Makes sense. So finally, the last scene I wanted to ask you about is what I think is probably the most. I guess it's the scene I think of first when I think of Modern Warfare. I'm not sure if that's by design or if that was you've purposely sort of left that open to the players. But it's the interrogation with the butcher. So that scene, I found it very interesting that you gave players the option to just nope out of that scene. Are players choosing to opt out of that, and did you expect a lot of players to do that, or is it there as more of a narrative choice than an actual design choice?
We are seeing some players opt out. We expected to see some players opt out. We don't design these things so that we hope that it's like a 50-50 split necessarily, but it's a valid choice, meaning that it's a valid choice for Kyle. Here it is, right in front of you. And we believe that, again, with the character development we've done, that at that point in the story, players, and we see this, players go, I'm not sure. And they think about it. They stand there and they think about it for quite a while. We built up the character of the butcher and sort of had him demonstrate what his version of what he's willing to do to get his way is, in order for our players to then go, well, he's a really bad guy. He doesn't have a moral line, so to speak, so why should I have one with him?
The butcher's wife and son are brought in. You're handed a gun, and the butcher won't talk. So, he's trying to call your bluff, is how I interpreted it effectively in the beginning. You've got to do something, and what are you going to do? So when you pull the trigger, though, at anyone, click. Nothing happens. So you are then, however, you're then given bullets on the stool that you can pick up and load in that gun and do what you will. So walk me through the design of that scene.
Sure.
And how it evolved.
Well, stepping back, you're not handed a gun. A gun is placed out there for you to choose to pick up or not. You can, in that moment, turn right around and exit and leave. You have free will. You can decide to bail at any moment. And then, of course, there's the dry fire. And the dry fire is a surprise, not only, again, emotional parody, not just a surprise to our players, but a surprise to Sergeant Garrick.
Yeah.
Right? Sergeant Garrick can't have any knowledge that the player doesn't have, otherwise you don't have that emotional parody with him. So right when the dry fire happens, he says, "What the hell?" And we believe our players are also thinking, "What the hell?" in that moment. Now the Butcher believes that even if he was calling your bluff, now when there's that extra layer of, and here's the ammunition for that weapon, now it gets a lot more real. The idea of loading it in front of him and understanding the implications of there are 6 going in the chamber. When those bullets are laid out, you can choose to very slowly, deliberately load each one into the revolver and then leave. However, by the time you're basically done loading that gun and now the Butcher realizes, has had some time to think about it, he gives you the information that you need and you can exit.
Yeah.
Anytime you are talking about these emotionally charged moments, people are going to have a lot to say, as they should, right? This is work that we're doing where we want to be really responsible. We want to be fair. We want to go about these things and not take them lightly. And so certainly every moment of the game is scrutinized, as it should be, but especially that moment, yeah.